All right, so let's take a look at chapter 4, which is all about repetition structures, which really just means to you that we are finally starting loops. So I get excited when we get to this chapter because you'll find that loops, you can do all sorts of cool stuff with them and they save you time. And then you'll get to see when we reach turtle that you can draw all sorts of cool, patterns and do just all sorts of things with them with very little code. So it's pretty fun. So you'll get the hang of it as we go through. So what we're going to do is let me go and click on this one, and you'll see some of the things that we'll be covering. For this video, we're just going to do a quick one-slide introduction and then talk about while loops, and then the rest of the stuff will be in other videos. So let's go ahead and just jump right in. So why do we like loops? Well, some of the things that you've seen so far, and I'll mention turtle again because I think everybody kind of really noticed it and did a lot of griping when we started using turtle, and you ended up with literally over 100 lines of code to do some pretty basic stuff. And as you learn how to use loops, you'll see that we can really limit the amount of code that you have to write and make the computer do the work for us. So, it helps us when you look at disadvantages to duplicating code. It's going to make, the programs are large when you have to duplicate things. It is very time consuming. And if you are copying and pasting code and doing all sorts of things, then you have to make a change. You got to go back and do that for everything else. So there's all sorts of different things. So we're going to make the computer do the work for us. And we're really going to look at two different types of loops. So we're going to look at condition controlled and count controlled. And so our condition controlled loop is while, meaning we're going to give it a condition and it's going to perform while that is still true. So let's go ahead and jump sort of right into that. And you'll notice as I click on this, don't forget when you're in Canvas, and also you can see in the PowerPoints, but I've included the links to where the author videos are. So you'll see Tony Gaddis has videos in here that will describe things, so maybe a little bit differently than I do. So if you're having a little trouble maybe understanding things, then go ahead and don't forget to check those links out. All right, so a while loop, as long as something is true, the computer is going to do something for us, and we really have uh, two parts. So we're doing something that's going to be tested. So our condition, we're looking for a true or false on this, and it's going to be repeated as long as it is true. So very similar to what we've done with if statements, and you'll notice the format down here as we get to it. You'll notice it looks a lot like what we did in the last chapter with decision structures. So it's the same kind of thing, but in order for this loop to stop executing, you have to have something happen inside the loop to make the condition false, and that's a big piece. And we'll talk about that in just a second with some of the code, and I'll show you live code with what we're doing there. All right, so here's our general format. You remember decision structures last chapter, so we had if statements, same kind of a thing, except we're using while. But you notice the format looks very, very similar. So we'll use while, then we'll have some type of condition that we're testing, and then a colon, and then tab or spaced over, we have our statements. And of course, we can bring these down and have lots of different statements that are included in the same loop. And we'll take a look at that. So as we're going through them, an iteration is a term that we're going to look at just briefly here. So one execution of the body of the loop. So what that means is as we're going through here, if we have, for an iteration, we have this, while, and then we're testing something, and then we have a statement here. So if it runs through one time and then the condition is changed to false, then that stops, that's one iteration. So each time it runs through, that's what we're talking about with iteration, okay? And a while loop, known as a pretest loop, so it's checking it ahead of time. So if you have a condition that is false, it's never going to start. So it'll simply skip right over it, and the computer won't even mess with it. It just skips the whole while statement. So you have to be really careful that you have to do a few things ahead of time, and we'll see that in just a second. But with a loop that we're checking in here, if you want to take a look at flowcharts, remember we have the different flowcharts in the book. This is where we're at. So if a condition is true, it's going to execute the statement and keep executing this statement, keep looping through as long as that's true. As soon as something happens in here to trigger it to be false, then it drops down. So what might happen with that? What might cause that? Well, here, I'll give you an example of a very simple little while loop. And we'll take a look at actual live code for this because I think it's a little bit more fun to check out. But before we get to that, just let me point out, See in red right here, count equals 0. We're using a counter variable. And so you'll see this is typically just called count or counter. And here's our condition that we're checking here. So we're saying while, here's our reservoir while. So while count is less than 3, with a colon here, we have a couple of statements. The first statement just says print howdy. Great. And then we have this statement here, so count plus equal 1. Remember that count plus equal 1 is the same thing as if we were to write the whole thing out, count equals count plus 1. So this is the same thing, just a short version of it, right? So either way you'd like to use it, it doesn't really matter to me. You might play around with it. Try this way if you haven't been messing with this way. Try it that way, okay? And what will happen with this is it's going to run through, and the first iteration that comes through, it's going to go and it's going to test this, so count less than 3, and then it's going to walk through its first iteration, and it's going to say, okay, print howdy. So it's going to print howdy, and then count now becomes 1. So count started at 0, now it becomes 1, and then it will keep looping through. So let's take a look at the code itself and kind of run it through. So here we go, same thing, same code that we have here in the PowerPoint. And I'm going to go ahead and visualize execution. And then you can see we've got a few steps here. So you notice the first step, the very first thing it's going to do is set count equal to 0. So here we go. My global variable, I've got a 0 here. I'm going to say next. And here goes the check. So we know that it's less than 3. Great. So we're running through, printed howdy once. I'm going to click next again. Goes back up. Notice now it executed this line, count equals 1. So I can step through again. This next line there goes with the print statement from line 5. Line 6 now is going to execute. Count now equals 2. I'm going to run through again and print howdy one more time. And then when that executes, now this is no longer true. So when it comes back up here, count is 3. So count is not less than 3. So when I hit next, boom, it's over, and that's the end of it. Okay, so this is typically how you'll see these run. You'll notice, I'm going to go back over here really quickly and talk about line 3. So what we've been doing, remember in Python, Python is a little bit easy for us as far as variables, and we've talked a lot about how if you are using other languages, you've got to declare and initialize a variable. In this situation, and most of the stuff that we've done so far, we haven't had to mess with that, right? So we've just been doing it out of habit. It's good coding practice and all that kind of good stuff. But for us now, if we don't set this up, if I comment that line out and then I go to visualize and then I go to execute that, you're going to get count not defined error. Okay, so we've got a little problem, right? So it doesn't know what count is equal to, so it doesn't know whether it's less than 3. So this is a situation where you must always, whatever variable you're going to use for, for your counter, you've got to initialize it. So we're setting it equal to 0, and then that way it knows when it's checking it that, oh yeah, okay, it is equal to 0, it's less than 3. All right, so another thing that you have to watch out for is, let's say you're very excited about this, you've got a loop in here, you're writing this in, and then you forget to put the count line. So let me comment that out. Okay, so I've got this commented out. So different kind of problem. Look at this. Stopped after 1,000 steps, please shorten your code, blah, blah, blah. So this isn't going to work, right? So what this is doing is it's saying, okay, count equals 0. Great. So while count is less than 3, you're going to go ahead and print howdy. So it's going to print howdy forever, right? So we've got a little problem there. So there's nothing to go back and tell this count variable to change and then end printing howdy out each time. Right? So you have to watch out for that. That's a big one. If we want to see this in REPL, let's see. So here we go. Same kind of a thing. Comment those out. And if I hit run here, you'll see, I mean, it just keeps going. It's just craziness, and it will just keep going and going and going, and that's what you get. So anyway, so this is continuing to print howdies. It doesn't look like it, but it is still printing. So anyway, so you've got to watch out for that. You'll end up with an infinite loop. So be very, very careful about this piece right here. So we want to go back and edit, and maybe I'll do this one, for a change. But now we have a way to end it, and if I step through all this, it'll go 3 times. Counts 3. There we go, back to our original. So you have, just again, a couple things to be careful of: the initializing the variable, setting it up there, declaring it, and you're setting this up, initializing it to 0 or to 1 or whatever you'd like to do here. Typically, I'd say you'll see 0 as a starting point, and using less than, then you know that this will run 3 times. So if I set this at 1, I would have to use less than equal to 3 to get that, or just less than 4. But typically you'll see something like this. So 0 as your initialized value, and then however many times you want it to run right there. All right, so anyway, so that's that. So a few things. I mean, you'll see in the PowerPoint here's some infinite loops, and you'll see the links to the things that you just saw on the screen. You have to be just watch out for that kind of stuff. Okay, so one of the other things that we can do with this, and this will be the last thing we'll talk about in this video before we move on. I know it's a little bit lengthy, but one of the last things that we'll do here is we'll talk about this type of thing. So as we take a look at this slide, you'll see a flowchart for a program, and we're going to take a look at the code in a second. You'll see several links here. I'll talk about those in a second too. So with this one, you notice how it starts out and it says assign Y to keep going. So we're setting something to keep going here, and here's our little keep going. So as long as keep going equals Y, then you're going to ask some questions. So you're asking for the amount of sales, and then you're going to ask for commission rate, and then it's going to display the commission. And then it's going to ask this question here. Do you want to calculate another? So meaning it's going to go ahead and run the program again. So until the user says, no, I don't want to run this again, or doesn't enter this, then the program will keep going and it'll ask for the input again. So this is really nice. This is the same kind of thing with, like if we're asking for a password to get into a program, they blow the password. You can say, sorry, you miss it, whatever, try again. So the program keeps running. So remember when we're doing this kind of things with decision structures, with our if statements, the program would end and we'd have to run the program, execute the program again, and run it. So with this, it's beauty because the program will keep going until we tell it to stop, which is pretty cool. So let's take a look at this particular code right here. Put it up here. Oops, I'm a little bit off on this. Let me see here. Bring this down a little bit. Right about there. Let's do this. Actually, let's do this. Make it bigger. Oh, there we go. That's a little better. Okay, so let's take a look at this code. So, and you obviously have the link on, there in the PowerPoint too. So maybe a little bit bigger. Okay. So as we take a look, here we're setting, this is sort of like what we did with setting our count variable equal to 0. We're saying keep going equals Y, because when we come to this statement, while keep going equals 0, notice 2 equals signs here, then you're going to do all this stuff. Okay, so this is our questioning and all that kind of stuff. If we don't put this here, then just, oops, whoa. Okay, just blow this up. There we go. If we comment that out and we don't have this, then this really isn't going to do anything. So it's going to say it doesn't know what keep going is. And so when I hit run, we just, get this little error. So it doesn't know what's up. Name, just like we saw in Python Tutor, keep going is not defined. So same thing, all right? So instead, of course, I'll put this back in here. Back in there. So we're setting that equal to Y. So while keep going equals that, then you're going to go ahead and ask these questions. So let's go ahead and run this. Okay, so enter the amount of sales. So if I say the sales were $5,000, right? And the commission rate, I'm going to say 5%. Notice the way I entered it there, 0.05. Talk about that in a second. Then it's going to calculate the commission and give it to you. So here it is. The commission is $250. So, and then it asks the question. Here we go down here. Do you want to calculate another commission? Enter Y for yes. So if I enter Y right there and I hit enter, I'm going to go ahead and, I don't know, same thing just because. My commission rate this time, I don't know, 6%. So it calculates it for you. Again, it's going to keep going forever. So we have this loop going. If I hit anything other than lowercase y, whether it's N, whether it's, I don't know, S, whatever it might be, the program will end and that's it. Okay, so that's something that this is a very nice feature to have. It's a great way to get more of a professional feel with the program. But let's talk about a few things in this program. The first one that, and I don't want to tear this program apart because we don't want a textbook that's 5,000 pages long, but it's a little bit vague on this kind of stuff. So when you're looking at these programs, always be thinking about how can I make this better, okay? How for the user. So for example, enter the commission rate. Well, I mean, the only reason I knew to put 0.05 in there is because I just happen to know that. What if someone put a straight up 5? So for example, and they think it's for percentage. So if I put $5,000 in here, what's the commission rate? Oh, it's 5%. Yeah, the commission is not going to be 5 times what the sales are. So you have to be careful of that. So one of the things that you might do let's see. Let's say we wanted them to enter just a regular number. So one of the things you could do is come over here, and I'm going to take commission rate, which the user's inputting here. And if I wanted to calculate the way that I just did a second ago, I could say commission rate divided by 100. Okay, and it's just a simple math thing. I put that in parentheses so it will calculate it. And now when I go back through and I say, okay, and the amount of sales, $1,000, commission rate 5, boom, it calculates it at 5%. But again, the user has no idea here. So when it says enter the commission rate, this is where you would take an opportunity to give the user a little bit more information. So you might say something like enter the commission rate. As a percentage, we're going to use, for example, you give them an example. Say if you would like to enter it as 5%, enter just a 5 and blah blah blah. So anyway, so you could do whatever you want to do there to dress it up a little bit. Another thing I want to talk about though is this little piece right here with keep going. So we're setting it ahead of time. We initialize it with a Y. But let's say someone types in a capital Y, right? So I'm going to stop that and execute again. So I enter whatever in here. Do you want to use calculate another? If I enter a capital Y, the program just ends. Okay, so you have to be prepared for that. So one thing you might do is come in here and you might say keep going equals lowercase y, or maybe we use, and I'll use, I don't know, double quotes just because, or it equals a capital Y. So now when I go to run this, you'll see same kind of a thing, and I'm going to come down here. Do you want to enter another one? Now if I enter a capital Y, boom, it drops me back in, asks me the questions again, and it will keep going that way until I hit something else. Um, oops. Okay, hold it. What am I doing? I do not want to do that. Oh, I'm an idiot. Hang on, hang on, hang on. Let's go back here. See, I do it the math way, and then I blow it up. All right, so let's do this again. Let's hit run again, execute again. And I'm going to enter my number here. And this time I'm going to say Y. So I'm going to go through and do this. And then this time I'm going to say enter whatever else, and then we'll execute. So sorry, I got a little bit lazy, did it the math way. Remember, we have to use complete, equations here so it'll work out. So sorry, I use math roots. Too many years of doing that. All right, so don't forget about that. You see, I do that just now, and I still do that from time to time. So anyway, so watch out for that. Another thing that you might do when you're looking at these kind of programs is, okay, so this program is all a while loop, okay? But maybe outside the while loop, maybe you want to go down here, and I'm going to pull this back over. Again, being very careful of where your spacings are, where your tabs are. So now I'm outside of this loop. So I know this is the end, so maybe I put something in here, I don't know. Thanks, I don't know, have a great day. 2 exclamation points. All right, so I'm ending that. So now when I run through and I hit run, go through and hit run, so I'm going to enter whatever here. Commission rate, do I want another one? No, I don't. So then it prompts here. Thanks, have a great day. You can even throw in a new line operator if you want. Oops. Just to drop it down a space. Okay, so there's a lot of options that you have here. Again, trying to make it simple for the user to figure out, and they need more information here than just enter the commission rate. Well, what does that mean to them? So be careful of that kind of stuff. The very last thing in this little section, this is another option. Oh, you see these other 2 links are just the same kind of a thing. So you'll see it, kind of what we just did a second ago. Now, when we take a look at this program, and this program is all about a max temp one. So let me see if I can just pull this in here. I may have to go over here. Do this again. Okay, so actually I'm going to go back to here so it's colored. Okay, so in this program, what it's doing is it's going through and it's checking out, it's setting a constant here. So max temp equals 102.5. Okay, great. And then we're asking this simple question, what is the temperature? So in this while loop right here, so while temp is greater than max temp, you're going to print this little thing out. Terribly inefficient way of doing this, but that's okay. So the temperature is too high, turn the thermostat down, blah, 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 all this kind of good stuff, okay? So if it's not greater than, it simply skips all of this, goes straight down here and says temperature is acceptable, check it again. So let's just run this really quickly. And I'm going to go like this. Hit next. And here's the temperature. So this time I'll say, I don't know, 105. I'm going to enter 105. You'll see temperature is there. So it's going to go through, and when it runs this while loop, it will walk through, and it's now going to print. I can hit enter now. Now it's printing each one of these as it's rolling down, going down through. And then it's going to say enter the, take the temperature, blah, 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 blah. Now it's going to say enter the new temperature. So this time I'll go below it. I don't know, it's at 90, let's say. And I hit submit. Now, when it comes out through, so move this out real quick so you can see the red. So now when it's going to do this line, it does the check. Boom, skips all that, right? Because the temperature is lower than the max temp. So it's simply going to print temperature is acceptable. Check it again in 15 minutes. Okay, so just another way to look at doing that. Okay, so that's the end of this little section. Hopefully you're feeling okay with while loops. We're going to play with them quite a bit, so you get a chance to mess around. And don't forget, there's another video here from the author, and the link is also in Canvas. Okay, so we'll stop this, and then the next video we'll talk about the next section.